If you want to publish a book, but you feel stuck, out of time, and you don't know what to do next, then it's time to finish the damn book. Here's your host, Susie Schafer.
Welcome to this episode of Finish the Damn Book. I'm your host, Susie Schafer. My guest today is Charles Daly, known as Charlie, a ghostwriter and developmental editor working with memoir and nonfiction. He specializes in helping authors go there with difficult topics. He's the co-author of I Will Follow You Anywhere, the true story of the 9/11 responders who took on Congress, by John Field and Charles Daly, forward by John Stewart, and Make Peace or Die, A Life of Service, Leadership, and Nightmares, which was featured on Jocko Podcast. His travel writing and long-form journalism has appeared in the Boston Globe, We Are the Mighty, Colcat, and Thought Catalog. That's a mouthful. He lives in a cottage on the Atlantic coast of Ireland with his wife, a Swiss crime novelist, their cat, and their baby boy. When he's not writing, he's exploring the coast in small boats or on call with his local lifeboat crew. I think that is using your intuition, because you're tapping into verbal and nonverbal cues. You're tapping into what is the feeling, the vibration you're getting from this person. Where are they at in as far as, are they being authentic or not? Those kinds of things are really what I think is how we use our intuition, our gut feelings about somebody. But then, of course, too, we also have to have the emotional intelligence to keep the doors open instead of slamming them shut and say, okay, tell me more. I want to learn more, because, you might be thinking this person is one way when really, once you get to know them and you're having that conversation with them, it's really something different. And there may be other reasons why they show up with maybe a mask on at first glance.
If I can stick with this question for a couple minutes, I know I'm already giving you the longest answer to this,
but as long as you want.
I won't belabor the examples. There's a book called A Guide for the Perplexed by Werner Herzog, where it's basically almost like a book-length interview. And he talks about a few situations where his intuition told him what sort of the exact right question to ask was when he was actually having a very unproductive interview with someone in a documentary. I think this really comes in handy, and it can actually, I've had it buy me time. The first business book I ever did, I was interviewing dozens of e-commerce shopkeepers, basically, like people who had founded online stores. And they ranged from people who had like really interesting kind of crafts that they had turned into a business and they were just like dedicated and cool, to like jerks who thought they were the next Jeff Bezos because they had happened upon some glitch in the drop shipping matrix. And there was this one guy who basically, before we even got on the call, wanted me to know how busy he was and how important his time was. And I just don't go for that kind of thing, because I've worked with people who really, their time really is valuable and they make time, take a book seriously. And so it already like wasn't going to be a good interview. And I asked him about, I kind of played to his ego a little bit. And I was like, you've been really successful. And like, I'm wondering what's the part that nobody realizes how difficult it was or something. And it was a little more specific than that. I don't want to give away what industry he was in exactly, but he was like, that's actually a really good question. And then all of a sudden he had all afternoon to talk to me, and he didn't have just 20 minutes. And so with people who have spent a lot of time with, like, either they've been media trained or they've told a story, John McCain's co-author talks about this, that some of the stories he told about the Hanoi Hilton, he had told them many, many times in speeches and public appearances and to interviewers. And so, and I had the same experience with my dad. Like, he had talked about the stuff he could talk about, and then it was my job to get him to talk about the stuff he couldn't talk about.
Right.
And that can be, we talk about the challenges of ghostwriting. I think sometimes when people have already created a narrative, or maybe they've done some therapy or whatever, and they've come up with sort of diagnostic language for their own life, that can be tricky, because they're kind of skipping the nitty. They'll be like, and that was when I was re-traumatized. And I'm like, hold on. Walk me through like that whole day. Like, we can label it later, but like,
Yeah, because they want to put it in the box because it's safe there. When really it's like, yeah, but we want more. You got to go deeper. We want to know what was happening, you know, everything that was going on. What was the weather? What were you doing? Where were you? Who were you with? What were you feeling? What'd you have for breakfast? It's like we
Yep.
want the details.
Yeah. And also, like, when it comes to how the reader experiences those things, people don't realize, like, there's nothing that will make you seem more untrustworthy and unreliable and maybe even full of it than sounding like you're perfect.
Yeah.
I think this is what a lot of people get wrong in writing about controversial topics is they kind of won't budge and they need their side to look like flawless.
Right.
And there's no story, there's nothing to talk about. And I think a lot of times if you lead with what about you is fragile or broken or kind of actually paints you in a bad light.
It's far more interesting. It really is. Nobody is perfect. We're all perfectly imperfect, all of our own unique ways. And I think that's when we celebrate the fact that people are unique and different, and yet we all have common bonds in some ways. Those are the things that people want to read about. That's what really interests people. They can be like, oh, wow. It was kind of that way for me when I had a friend who turned out to be a frenemy tell me that my ability to channel and do card readings, she said, well, that is like the sexy factor with what you do in publishing. And I said, what? I said, are you kidding? I said, I can't share that. I do that. I said, people are going to think I'm weird. I'm not going to get any clients, And in fact, once I stepped into that authenticity and started sharing that I offer that as a service and it's a gift of mine, once I started doing that, my whole business shifted because now I was being authentic. So I was attracting the same type of people that wanted to be authentic with their words and not the people that were stuck in ego or wanting to make themselves appear to be perfect or somebody that they weren't. It changed the entire face of my business.
Yeah, I could see that. And it's one of those things like you kind of, at some point, you sort of almost have to be authentic to like live with yourself in a way.
Just be yourself. If you're weird, that's fine.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Yeah. And I think too, a lot of times people, who have really interesting stories, the one thing a lot of them have in common is they are very comfortable in their own skin or in being different or being who they are or what have you. And they're not necessarily going to want to work with someone who's just like inauthentic or people pleasing or
cookie cutter, or you don't get to actually talk to that person. That's one of the things that I have heard many times over is that people love the fact that I didn't pass them off to somebody else on the team, that when they were setting a call with me, one of my authors, that they got me every time, that we actually got to have a face-to-face conversation, that I was the one responding to their emails because it gives them the assurance that they are important.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of the basis for all of it.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And it's so funny how like that almost goes without saying, but you ask about process and stuff. And I think that's huge. It's like, and it's a term that gets overused these days, but people, feeling heard.
Yeah.
And this has come up a lot. And I think it's really relevant today where people can be so siloed in like how they live their lives and what their, media diet looks like or even where they live. And that is, that doesn't mean that you have to be identical to the people you work with.
True.
And, it's one of those things. I think like I was given some advice early on that like, it pays to be open to working with all sorts of people with all sorts of ideas, but you want to be careful if someone sort of needs you to have the same views as them.
Right. Exactly.
I think it's like in broad terms, they're like, it's totally valid. Like if you're a woman, you want to work with a woman or vice versa, or you sort of want someone who kind of understands basically some of your experience. But I think when people are like, when it's at the level of stuff that sort of isn't someone's business and it's like, you need to be exactly this person or I can't.
Yeah.
Because there are all sorts of, I mean, it's funny. Like I always think one of the great like he would have been a good ghostwriter, is like Johnny Cash, where like,
Oh yeah, for
you know,
sure.
imagine if someone had told him like, who are you to write songs about like prison? And that's not at all your quote lived experience or,
Yeah,
you know,
that's fascinating. Okay, so maybe we can have Johnny Cash come back, be reincarnated, and be a
he'd
ghostwriter.
be a
He'd be
good podcast guest, I
amazing.
think.
Would he? Be so interesting. Okay, so you know I love to read cards. Shall we pull a few cards for our listeners and see if there's any messages for them?
Yeah, let's do that. I was like very intrigued about this part, so let's do
Kind
it.
of like magic. Just kidding.
The last time I did this was with a friend who had bought the cards so far. That was her level of, I don't even know what the term is, but like her entree into this world so far was just she had the cards. And so she pulled a couple for me, but then she got out, and it was very entertaining for both of us, but she got out the instructions then and kind of basically read what they were because she'd not actually properly done this, if that makes sense.
She's learning. So there's different types of card decks. First of all, there's tarot, which is the most famous and most popular. A lot of people do read tarot cards. I actually read, and I do know how to read tarot. I have chosen, and this is based on my own personal guidance. My guides have told me that I was to work with oracle cards because in a past life I was an oracle. So it just was fitting. So that's what I do. And I do, every reader will have a little bit of a different style. I don't read from the guidebooks from the decks. I have read them and I do know what they say. But really what happens is when I'm pulling cards or doing a reading, I'm actually channeling the information. And certain cards have very specific meanings for me. I just glanced at the bottom of the deck and I got deep knowing. Deep knowing is the card of claircognizance, deep knowing. That is that card. And you get a lot of synchronicities and things like that. But basically, it's the way I interpret the cards is how I do the reading. So do you have a question that you'd like to ask that you think the audience might have an interest in?
Ask you? Or
you can ask me, the cards, God, source, whatever floats your
oh
boat.
man. Oh, I should have come prepared.
You're always prepared. You just don't think you are.
I'm trying to think. It's so funny because a lot of times I think about like questions around work and craft and stuff in these really practical kind of humdrum ways. But I sort of want to have a little more significant question for, you know, if we're going to invoke kind of spiritual guidance. I think that like existential sort of big life question that I deal with all the time at work, and I don't think I'm alone here, is balancing the, like, how do I know if I'm on the right track when it comes to balancing what is like a convenient way to make a living off of my skill set versus something that's like riskier but could have be more rewarding
kind of thing.
Yeah, but with that payoff could be a long time coming and all of that. And I never know the answer really.
Okay.
Like, I guess that it's kind of a question of more questions, isn't it? Of like,
it is,
what do I?
What's interesting is, let's see what the cards say too. But what you're really doing is you're not listening to your intuition. So try tapping into that. And sometimes people will actually just sit for a few minutes and they can say, okay, I'm going to flip a coin. This is a good one that I learned. I'm going to flip a coin. Heads is I go this direction, choice A. Tails is choice B. I'm going to flip a coin. And then when I see what response the coin gives me, what happens in my physical body? Do I get a little thunk in my chest that is disappointment? Or do I feel a little bit of butterflies in my tummy that make me feel gleeful? That is your intuition. And that is a good way to start training yourself to listen to your intuition, because you're using your physical body. The physical body knows everything. We cannot lie to the physical body, right? Even if we play mind tricks with it, we still can't lie to the body. And so, and you've heard that the body keeps the score.
The body keeps the score. I was going to say.
So try doing that. When you are faced with a question or a challenge like that, try that coin toss trick and see if that doesn't work for you. Because I think that is a good way to start training yourself to listen to your intuition. And pretty soon it becomes second nature. You just know. You just know. Yeah.
It's funny. That makes a lot of sense. And that really tracks with something I've tried to do. And I guess intuition is the right word for it. I find, like, if I'm, as a friend of mine calls it, like holding court, like if I'm
Yep.
trying to tell you what a good idea something is, that's highly suspect.
Right.
Whereas if I'm
That's
like
being
fired up,
manipulated, right?
totally. Where if I'm like fired up and enthusiastic about something,
Yeah.
then it might be a good idea. Like it
Yeah.
could be, I'm excited because it's where I want to be going, versus like, oh, but this will pay more and this, and
All right. So let's see what the cards say.
let's do it.
Risk versus reward. How does Charlie know? The first card out is a 19 card. So 1 plus 9 reduces to a 10. 10 is the ending, but that is actually because if you further reduce to 10, it'd be a 1. So 1 represents the start of a new cycle. This card is flexible. And so it's showing a woman who's like doing a back bend over an egg. And so it's hard to see on the camera there. So what it's saying is you need to allow yourself to be flexible and say, okay, what would happen if I did choose A versus B? Like, map it out, do a pros and cons, those kinds of things. Allow yourself to kind of go back and forth with it. But then, like I said, do that coin toss. It'll really help you make that decision. Now, the egg represents the birth of new ideas, creativeness, fertility, all of those things. And because it's in a 1, this is a cycle of a 1 starting from the beginning. It's saying, go back to the drawing board. If you're really stuck, go back to the drawing board and start again. And you'll notice in the background, there's these paths. It kind of reminds me of the yellow brick road in The Wizard of Oz. It's just saying, follow your path, but you can always go back into the beginning and say, okay, let's break this down. Let's look at it from a different perspective and see, because when you get into that flexibility, then the creativity will just flow. Now, your next card is a 40 card. So 4 plus 0 is a 4. 4 is the number of stability and balance. I like to think of it as stable like a table, because the table has 4 legs, right? This card is co-create. And on the card, you've got a cheetah sitting on like some ruins, ancient ruins. You've got an owl on like a tightrope, and then you have an egg at the bottom. So the cheetah represents going fast and being speedy, right? But sometimes you can see the cheetah right here is resting. So the cheetah is not going fast. The cheetah is conserving its energy because it knows that there's something to come. The owl represents our higher self, our wisdom, our knowledge, stuff that we've brought with us to this lifetime. And the egg represents, again, fertility, creativity, new ideas, those kinds of things. So when you are faced with a question like that, it sometimes helps to co-create with someone else to say, what's hidden in this egg? What is the thing that we're not seeing? What is being hidden from us right now? And when you can tap into those different resources, your higher wisdom, but also co-creating with somebody else, sometimes the answers will just come. They'll just show up for you. And then your last card is a 15 card, so that reduces to 6. 6 is the number of love. So that's the vibration of everything that is that love vibration. And love vibration is the highest vibration that we are able to possess, right? And this one is message in a bottle. It's very interesting because the pelican is sitting on top of the bottle with a spyglass. And the pelican represents, again, it brings babies, right? So it brings you new ideas, birth, those kinds of things. Inside the bottle, there's a telephone. So there will be a message that will come to you, and you can ask your guides, higher self, please bring me the message I need in order to make this decision. So with the pelican having the spyglass, it's something that he's been looking for a long time, but he's blindfolded. So there's something in the way or something blocking his sight and his ability to see forward. Now, water represents emotion, but you see the water is very calm, although it's deep. So when you get this text message or phone call, and it's the answer you've been looking for, it's going to have a lot of emotion for you, very deep emotion, but not in a negative way. It'll just be the thing that you needed to hear at that moment. So just tapping into your intuition, asking for, hey, send me a sign, right? Send me a sign. What am I supposed to do right now? And people do that in all types of different faiths. Say, I need a sign, right? I mean, there's Carrie Underwood sang about it. Jesus, take the wheel, right? So it's something that is very easy for us to do, but we forget to do those things. In fact, we end up getting all up in our head, in our minds, to try and solve a problem instead of asking our higher self or our guides, God, source, whatever, for the guidance and the messages that need to come through. But there you have it.
That was cool. That was really cool. And it's one of those things you'd mentioned being hesitant to mention that or incorporate that in your work. And it's such a striking example of, I guess, exactly what I'm saying, where it's really a shame when people have kind of that already cookie cutter idea of who they want to work with, because like I did not know I was going to do a card reading today. That was something that was not on the cards, literally. And
not
it's
in the
like
cards, but now they are.
yeah, and it's like that's super interesting. And I couldn't have, I mean, to me, that's like what collaboration is about. Like I couldn't have, if it was just up to me to come up with exactly the podcast we were going to do, it wouldn't have been as interesting or as different or as rich as that. It would probably just be me talking to myself. Because I'm not meant to, that's not a collaboration. If it's,
Right.
And anyway, I just think that's really cool. And it's good for you that I followed your intuition to bring that into what you're doing.
Yeah. And sometimes
that's brilliant.
when I work with authors that do have writing blocks or are stuck or are still processing maybe a little bit of trauma, and we do a reading for them, a lot of times what happens is the cards will indicate the area that they need to work on or focus on. And so it then gives them this huge relief because they now have permission to do that work or to write about that thing that's challenging. And you can always say to them, hey, we don't have to use it in the book, but write the story anyway. When they do, and they go through this process, they come out of it saying, wow, that was really helpful because I was struggling to write the words. And this gives me permission to do it. Yeah.
Brilliant. Yeah, that's great. And there's such a rich history too of like, I think the surrealists would be big into that, of like automatic writing and different ways you can shake up the unconscious.
Yeah.
I think it's really to our detriment as creatives when we ignore the possibilities there, for sure.
Yeah. So what kind of publishing advice would you like to give people that are listening as far as from, advice from a ghost? Let's just call it that.
Oh man, sure. Wow. I don't know. I mean, I don't know. It's one of those things, like having had my first taste of like the kind of a big five in print, traditional publishing, etc. I feel like I almost know less about it than when I started, because I now have like more questions, and there's a lot that worked for this project that might not work for the next book or what have you. I think try to get really good advice. Try to talk to people who aren't going to just sort of like tell you what you need to hear. Like if you're someone who wants to write a book, don't make weird assumptions about what's possible or not. Like you're better off having like an agent tell you that your book isn't right for, there's a veteran I knew who's one of these people, he should write a book. He never will, but he's just this old senior enlisted Navy guy. And he was like, I don't get all these people who say like, I wanted to join the military. There's recruiters everywhere. They're literally like, and his thing was like, if that's what they want to do, like, or, people on some internet forum, it's like, you need to be able to do this many push-ups. It's like, well, why don't you let the Navy tell you if you should be in the Navy or not? Like, why, that's a weird example just from the folks I've worked with as a ghostwriter. But like, I think it's like anything, like big publishers don't know what they're looking for. Like they say they do, but it changes all the time. They constantly are wrong. And so it's like, you could let a publisher tell you no, rather than just like psych yourself out and tell yourself some story about what kind of book. Right. The other thing, and this came up in somebody I talked to, like to give you a little more practical advice, the one thing I wish everybody knew was how low the threshold for bestseller status is and how ultimately kind of meaningless that metric is.
Yeah.
If you stopped someone in the street and said, how many books does it take to be a bestseller? They'd probably say like, 1 million, 10 million. I mean, it could be as low as like 2,000, depending on what came out
Yeah,
and
I
we're
do
talking like,
bestseller campaigns for my authors all the time. And I had one go bestseller yesterday. And it's not hard to do. And, there is some chatter around people saying, oh, well, you're gaming the system. It's like, no, not really, because what we're doing is we're using tools that work with the algorithms on Amazon, for example. And so we get you there because I think that's important. It is a sense of pride for people to know that their book is being sought after. Now, if you're going to go after a New York Times bestseller, that's a completely different thing.
But even that could be four figures.
Yes.
Like it's not even 10,000 books is New York Times bestseller.
Mhm.
Like it could be as little as, I think, again, depending on what came out that week, it could be 2,000 books or something like that, or 5,000 max.
It's a strategy. That's really all it is.
With Amazon, it could, because they have these wonderful little niches. I mean, it could be if what it is, like, dentist memoirs, like, you could sell 5 copies and you're number one.
Underwater basket weaving or something like that,
Yeah. So, but, so there's that. I think some of those, like, I really wouldn't listen to anyone who hasn't worked on a bestseller or worked in books or whatever on their advice about that. Cause it's same with people who are like, oh, well, this could be a movie. It's like, did a producer tell you that? Cause if not, that's meaningless.
And it's tough. I actually have a screenplay that's being looked at, and it's tough. It's been years that we've pitched this screenplay, and we've had a lot of people interested in it. And I think it's actually getting picked up, but it's a long process and not all of them work. So, you have to just be realistic with it. But I'm not saying that to squash anybody's dreams, because if you want to do it and you want to go for it and put in the work and the money and everything else, then you do it.
Right. And so that's my like trad publishing kind of little hot take. But if I can step back from that too, I think when it comes to self-publishing, there are a lot of opportunities to be really creative with how you publish the book, what the book actually ends up looking like, how you market it. And I think that there's just a lot there to play with. And I would encourage people to sort of really think about those things. Yeah, I don't know. And I don't know that I've sort of been around long enough to really know the landscape of publishing or what have you. I think considering the reader always, that's kind of in that bad writing advice of like, don't write, just write for yourself. It's like, and sometimes the audience is like your partner or like your best friend. I mean, I think it can really take the pressure off if you put like, dear whoever at the top of the page and write for that person, even if you want more people than just them to read it. Yeah. I don't know. Don't give up. Like, maybe this is the best advice I can give anyone. And it goes to that thing of like making up, quitting before you've even got to the starting line. Like, don't like self-edit before the fact. Like, don't decide ahead of time what is or isn't interesting about your story, And I think, again, that goes to like that, and that can actually get really difficult to work with. Like, I'm trying to give advice that is going to help whoever you collaborate with, whether it's a ghostwriter or an editor or a book coach. I had a project implode one time because someone just wouldn't talk. And they were saying the right things. They said they wanted to write a book, but every interview was kind of just like, well, what do you want me to tell you? It was a tough time.
That doesn't make sense.
I don't know. I was hoping you were going to tell me. I thought we were going to write a book. And of course that book never happened. And, stuff like that. I don't know. Nobody wants like the highlight reel.
No, they want the juicy details. They want to know all the stuff that went down, good, bad, and different. That's what makes a good book. And that's what editors are for. That's what ghostwriters are for, is to figure out what fits and what doesn't. So, I call that the big barf. Like, you just barf it all out and then let your ghostwriter editor decide what's important and what's not, what's repetitive, what's not, where are there missing pieces, where are there holes in the story? You're like, how did you get from here to here? That doesn't make sense at all. Like, those are the things that working with professionals is really going to help you turn your nothing burger into a great book. So yeah.
And like, have fun. There's not too many opportunities to just have somebody just kind of listen to you for hours. And if you have any advice here, like
better
I
than
still
therapy.
haven't, it's totally. Well, therapy, you don't end up with like a book at the end. I mean,
Right. Yeah.
You know what?
If you could go to therapy and end up with a book, then hey, that's a winning combination. But I don't know any therapists that are doing that right now. So
No,
in the
well, I
meantime,
think that would be
we'll
against,
cover that.
I think that's against HIPAA, right? And patient confidentiality. The one thing I haven't quite figured out how to navigate is there is this weird silence for both of us after, like, I just wrapped up a proposal that was really full on, and we were talking like pretty much all afternoon every day to get this thing done. And then we went from that to like the author sent it in, we're both waiting, we don't need to talk, like we'll text and stuff, we don't need to be on the phone for hours anymore. And there's a weird like missing that experience that happens. And I don't quite know how to, like, maybe I should send really nice thank you cards or something. There needs to be something to round that off. I don't know.
You mean in the transition between you finishing the work with them and them going into the production phase?
Yeah, or just the work being over.
Yeah.
I mean, I think finishing a book is emotionally really hard for anyway, but to share it and to have that shared experience come to a close, I think is, yeah, it's weirdly sad.
Yeah.
Too quiet. I don't know.
It's almost like when a relationship doesn't really end, but it's ended. And you're like, what's the status of this? Well, I don't
Yeah,
think so.
what are we?
I hate to use words to define it, but what are we? Yeah, it's kind of like that. We'll have to talk about that. In fact, maybe because I'm going to be a guest on your show as well. Thank you for that.
I know. Yeah. Like, see you tomorrow.
Talk about that. We brainstorm some ways to like have that transition be a little bit easier and not feel like I just lost my best friend. Right? Yeah.
Totally.
Okay. So Charlie, how can people find you?
Yeah, I was on all the social medias. I've kind of just been absent. I'm on LinkedIn, but I don't like it. So my name is Charles Daly, Daly. My website is Daily Prose, Dalyprose, like prose as opposed to poetry.com. You can find me there. And yeah, and through there you can email me or whatever.
And you're also part of the Mangus Media Group as well, correct?
Yes. Yeah, that's a new thing. And Jeffrey's been on my podcast. He's just awesome. I have a lot of time for him, and I'm really excited to see what he's doing with that group. Because yeah, and that's been another, I will say, like, you and I think both run in some of the same ghostwriting networking groups and peer groups. And I found this to be such a supportive community, and people are all really smart. There's a huge diversity of kind of life experiences and backgrounds and stuff. I haven't met two people who had the exact same path to this work. And it's just been great. And it's been so different from any other kind of work colleague experience I've ever had.
I have to agree. And it doesn't feel like a job. You know what I mean? And
yeah.
It's like I get to show up and do this really cool thing that I do every day. And, it's awesome. It's amazing. The people I get to work with and the people I get to meet, whether they're authors or colleagues or family members of the authors or however that works. And it just kind of brings it all together to where, like, yeah, this is about mission and purpose for sure.
Yeah, it's awesome. And, we end up like, and I think you're dealing with people who are all pretty emotionally intelligent, and usually like their smarts are in their words and their ability to express themselves and to listen and to understand people. And I think that creates and I will say, like, the nature of the subject matter that a lot of us work on, especially in memoir, lends itself to really real conversations. As I've put it, some of the things that have gotten me the job for ghostwriting projects would have been red flags in a corporate interview.
Right.
And I love that. I like that. There is no way it would ever be appropriate for me to talk about the worst day of my life, the worst year of my life in a corporate setting.
Right.
Like, a lot of like mental health stuff does not belong in a casual work Zoom. These are things that have gained the trust of authors I've worked with and made it clear that I'm the right person to tell their story. And I just like that. I like doing something that doesn't feel frivolous or corporate. And yeah, I don't know. It is not a job, or it doesn't feel that way.
No, not at all. Thank you so much for being here, Charlie. This has been an amazing conversation.
Susie, this is brilliant. And I know we've run over time. I hope your listeners got something out of this. And
It will be great. So,
all right. Great.
Thank
Well,
you.
yeah, and for anyone who ends up working with me, I don't talk nearly this much during interviews. It's weird to be on the other end of an interview.
That's great to have you. Thanks, Charlie.
Thanks again, Susie.
If you found this interesting, I encourage you to join me for the next episode, and be sure to subscribe. Each week, one lucky listener who subscribes and posts a review on Apple Podcasts or iTunes will be entered into a drawing for the grand prize, a private VIP day with me valued at $25,000. So be sure to subscribe and post a review. Until then, keep on writing so you can finish the damn book. We'll see you next time.
So that's it for today's episode of Finish the Damn Book. Head on over to wherever you listen to podcasts and subscribe to the show. One lucky listener every single week that posts a review on Apple Podcasts or iTunes will win a chance in the grand prize drawing to win a $25,000 value private VIP day with Susie Schafer herself. Head on over to finishthedamnbookpodcast.com and pick up a free copy of Susie's gift. And join us on the next episode.